Um, all right, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy school day to join us. We are really excited to have Joyce Huang from MidTown Cleveland. Little background, she was my project manager before I returned to grad school, and she's been a really great mentor to me, and I hope she has some great insights for you all. Couple housekeeping notes. As it relates to CRIPSA, be on the lookout. We will be posting information about e-board signups for next year. So just keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can we can wait for a Q&A at the end. But with that, I will pass it off to Joyce.
All right, thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you. I know that it's the end of the day, or maybe beginning of the day for some of you if you have homework or classes, but just want to keep it interactive, since it's always just great to know each other, which I think is one of the things that I always felt like I got out of talks like this when I was a student. So I think, first of all, I just wanted to check in with everyone and see, and feel free to use the chat. I think that's also easier. You know, if you want to share like your name, what year you are in your program, and maybe one of your planning interests. If you just want to drop it into the chat, that'd be really cool, so I can get to know who you are. And of course, if there's anything that I'm talking about that you want to hear more about, feel free to stop me or ask the question. But yeah, if you could just go ahead and pop your name in the chat and your year and what your planning interests are, that'd be really great. In the meantime, I can share a little bit about myself. I'm happy to share about my journey and how I ended up where I am. So currently, I'm the Vice President of Community Development at MidTown. We have two big teams at MidTown. So we have a community development team, and then we have an economic development team. And as Nick mentioned, he was a part of my team 2 years ago now, maybe? 2 years ago now, that's crazy. And he was in AmeriCorps Vista working on our local work. But of our community development team, I guess I can share more about that. We do some Asia Town work, and we also work with MidTown proper for neighborhood planning. So a little bit about my journey and how I ended up in urban planning. So I'm from upstate New York, so I grew up in Rochester. I went to the University of Michigan, so I will take the opportunity to say go blue, which my 2-year-old daughter has also learned what Michigan is and to say go blue. So just pop that on the recording for the record. And then during my time there, I thought I was going to be like a pre-health major, kind of went in circles around what my future was going to be, and then landed in sociology, specifically around like urban studies and some international based sociology work. So after that, I took kind of a non-traditional route. So I worked for 7 years for a national campus ministry organization. So it was on college campuses at Case Western and Oberlin College, which is what led me to Cleveland. And during my time there, even though I had studied urban studies in college and, went to Detroit, periodically, and Rochester itself is somewhat of a post-industrial city. I think it was just kind of came to reality when I was living in Cleveland and being like, what's going on with the city? Like, why is there tree-lined boulevards on one side and then I guess you would call it urban blight on the other? And just really thinking through like, wow, these post-industrial structures that are sort of like the remnant and the vestiges of Cleveland's sort of glorious past, as well as just like the very obvious racial segregation. Like there was something very like just obvious about it all. And it was like very hard to grapple with. And I think on top of that, like my own identity as an Asian American, I was like, how do I fit into this narrative of like being here in Cleveland? Which is sort of how I started to relate more to the Asia Town work, which I do now. So I think in all of that, I ended up reading one of Norm Krumholtz's books and watching his documentary about Cleveland, which is like so great. It's like Norm legendary equity planner, Clevelander. And I think once I really started to like understand the city and understand the history, I like really fell in love with Cleveland. So that's kind of where I ended up with in urban planning. Like after doing my 7 years of campus ministry work, I switched careers, went to grad school at CSU for urban planning, and then got a job right away at Midtown, working in economic development at first, and then really pivoting towards urban planning. So I'm gonna take a look at the chat. This is great. So yeah, it looks like a mix of master's and undergrad. Great. Ooh, a Clevelander. That's exciting. And yeah, I see some folks from like other places like Florida. Very, very cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I have like a really quick presentation about Midtown as an organization, and then some of my a planning deck with like some of my personal philosophies and our team's philosophies. So I'm gonna just jump into that, and I'll try not to talk for too long. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully, can you see my full screen right now? All right, so this is Midtown. Really quick show of hands, who knows about Midtown in Cleveland? It's okay if you don't, but if you are from Cleveland or been in Cleveland, okay, so I see at least one hand. So, so where is Midtown? This is a map of sort of the health tech corridor, but if you think about the east side of Cleveland, with downtown being at the center, and then you have like the west side of Cleveland, Midtown is in the heart, kind of in the middle of east side, which is between in downtown and University Circle. So those are kind of like our two main employment centers, our two downtowns. And Midtown is right here in the middle. And for a long time, you know, a lot of our development has been east-west, and Midtown was kind of like that last piece, the last connecting piece between downtown and University Circle in terms of like urban vibrancy. But I think it'd be remiss to talk about the communities that are north and south of Midtown. So, you know, the communities to the north and south include Huff and Central, Fairfax, St. Clair Superior, Asiatown. So these are, majority of those are historically Black. It was where the Black community was forced to live through segregation, or was a part of redline communities. And so you kind of have this like commercial corridor cutting through like historically Black communities, as well as like those small Asiatown that has settled just sort of north of Midtown too. So that's, I think that's really important context for the work that we do. And if you look at the footprint, for those who are like urban designers, I guess all of us as planners, you'll see that a lot of this is very commercial, big footprints, you know, very industrial. There's a lot of urban renewal and demolition to clear the way for like factories and industrial uses. And a lot of history then, therefore, too, is also lost in that like breaking up of the footprint. And shoot, I wish I had my historic photos in this deck, but I don't. And you'll see like surrounded by Midtown is all these residential communities. So, you know, very briefly, our vision is to connect community, to be the center of it all, an inclusive place for people to innovate, create, prosper, and live, and to really leverage our assets to develop a dynamic neighborhood that unites the city's downtown and innovation districts. And it was really significant for us to come up with this vision and mission because we used to be a chamber of commerce. So very business-centric, again, commercial corridor. And 4 years ago with our new executive director, we really shifted and then became more neighborhood oriented. So how do we really create like a complete neighborhood where residents, employees, everyone alike can find what they need? So this is our team. We have grown from like the 4 to 5 that I think we had, Nick, when you were there, to a team of 11, which is fantastic. And we're just really excited about, everyone is just awesome at our team. And to just kind of go through some of our like work buckets. So for me specifically, as the community development team, we really think about neighborhood planning. The second bucket is really around community engagement. And I will say that it's not just about community engagement for engagement's sake or just like do a cool program, but it's really how do we loop in residents and the community's desires into our planning and our policies in an ongoing way. So it's not just like project by project, like, hey, what's up? I'm going to call resident A, or just like, hey, we're going to do like a youth movie night. It's more like, how do we actually have residents inform the work that we do? And how do we mix up what might be a more traditional planning process in order to do that? And then finally, the last bucket is around place building and place and public art. So if we're going through neighborhood planning, we actually are just completing our neighborhood plan, all these beautiful maps. You can see there's not that many residents, you know, each dot is a person. So I think one of our challenges is like, how do we, bring together more connection and more housing to become more of a community within Midtown. But then you can see that there's a lot of cultural identities kind of around Midtown, and how do we kind of blend that into the fabric of Midtown and have more fuzzy boundaries, I would say. Another thing is around economic development. So this is where people live, Midtown employees live, and actually not a lot of employees live in Midtown, which Nick was studying very closely during his year with us. It's like this big spatial gap of like people who drive in from far to work in the area. So the pipeline for jobs is something we're continuing to think about. However, our location is great. Like it's right along the Health Line. It's between downtown University Circle. This is new to us, but not new to the neighborhood, is a need to focus on improving community health outcomes and to really build in more public space for social infrastructure. So the tiny dot under here is like our only park. And this is like a private park that's not really welcoming. So clearly we needed to do a lot more with that. And then finally, Midtown was designed to be a pass-through. Like a lot of it happened when Chester Avenue was built, which is this like 7-lane highway essentially, cutting through the east side, and it really split the relationship between what is called Midtown now and the Huff community. So, as a part of like white flight and depopulation, these roads are like wounds that kind of are showing the divide that exists in our communities. So we want to redesign that. And so we came up with these goals that I think feel good to Midtown, and some strategies, which I won't really go through, but it's very holistic, thinking through everything from 13, dismantling the barriers like Chester Avenue and healing those wounds, relationship-wise, to elevating Black and Asian creative voices and having them show up in the arts that we have going on in our neighborhood. Very quickly, we also have an Asiatown team who worked on an Asiatown strategic vision. And this is a community that has not been engaged until recently because of language gaps. You can see Nick right in the center of this. We do corridor planning too, since we are very heavily corridor based. So Nick was really essential in thinking about Carnegie Avenue, which cuts very east-west. We just completed a corridor study connecting Midtown to Huff along East 66th Street. And the Cleveland Foundation is moving here. Dunham Tavern Museum is doing like a big park study, and the street would then connect the League Park Baseball Heritage Museum, which is where the Cleveland Indians originally played, or Cleveland baseball team, they're no longer called the Indians. And then the Huff branch of the library is moving there. Chateau Huff is a neighborhood-based winery. And so this street is so essential. And I think we were really proud about our results around this 21st century street planning because, oh, this is the wrong graphic. This is a regular sidewalk. This is a multi-purpose path. But I think the idea is that we invited 2 artists to be a part of our planning team. And, what the traditional planning process for street infrastructure is very like, let's plan the street, let's get it to the engineers, and then they'll deliver on it. And let's have 3 public meetings to verify that everything's good. But the artists themselves, I think they brought 2 things to the table. The first is, you know, really taking their design thinking into the process to see like, how can we mix this up and make sure that it's really representing what the community wants. And their artists, as artists, they had a community-based practice. So Daniel Gray Kantar is a rapper, he's a journalist, he works with young people, he's a spoken word poet. And then Lexi is a choreographer, and she thinks a lot about how people flow in space. So I think that was just amazing because they brought so much to the table, and they essentially led our community engagement process and came up with just like such fire like recommendations that we never could have come up with, mostly because it came from young people, it came from the residents, and so we do more planning, trail planning, place building and public art. I'll just quickly scroll through this. So like signage and utility box wraps by local artists, bike racks, which Nick worked really hard on, getting installed and going through the city processes. We have a big Mural Festival. So if anyone's in the area, come up August 23rd to 28th. We're going to install 20 murals and have tons of programming. Like these are examples of murals that are going up. Banners, thinking through tree cover. And then for programming and community building, we have like happy hours. Of course, this is pre-COVID. Our Dave's Market hosts like local cooking, teaching classes. And then Leo's is this like very resident-based initiative where during the period of urban renewal, there was a building that was demolished that used to hold this amazing Motown club where the Supremes kind of got their start there, coming out of Detroit. Bunch of other folks played there. Otis Redding played his last concert before he died and on a plane crash. So, so this is like a piece of history that was really important to a lot of the community members in the area, but it was like very much erased. Now there's an Aldi's there. And when the construction happened, they even tore out the historical marker around Leo's Casino. So of course it's just like so offensive, like this place of joy, especially for Black community members, was taken apart and literally trashed. And so, you know, part of the goal is like these residents want to remember that legacy, but also to eventually create a permanent space. So what we did to support that vision is like we created the infrastructure to like support these concerts, jazz concerts, folks who used to even play at Leo's would play, to do these pop-up events to activate space and say like, look, there's a market here for a space that would celebrate arts and entertainment. And this is our food truck event. So all in all, like there's just like so many things that happen, as you know, in urban planning that really make a place special. So I think for us, as we think through development and what our place looks like, it's really thinking through how do we incorporate residents into what we do? How do we activate spaces that represent community members, like popping up in this parking lot in Asiatown, or having youth create you know, artwork and poetry in response to redlining and zoning practices. And how do we, and while Midtown has really developed as like a commercial corridor, I think it was really important to hear from residents, like, if we see another glassy corporate building, I'm gonna go crazy. Like, I'm just gonna lose it, because there was so much organic culture in our corridor that was destroyed during like urban renewal and demolition. And there was so much culture and history that was, a lot of it was lost. And so I think we really took that to heart, to think through like, well, all right, if there's gonna be new development, like the Cleveland Foundation, they really took to heart, like, we're not gonna do reflective glass, we're gonna do transparent glass. And we're going to do much more natural wood and like natural looking materials. And this is going to be a mass timber building too, which is like fantastic. But not only that, I think the Cleveland Foundation, we've been encouraging them and being in dialogue, like, okay, so you can build your building in a way that feels more transparent to the community, but if your practices internally don't change, it's not going to make that big of a difference. And that's something that we've taken to heart too, is like, we have really taken seriously, like, all right, if we really want to make a dent in like racial equity in our neighborhood, like we have to then analyze like our own practices around real estate and policies, and to make sure that we are we did like an audit of our real estate practices to make sure that like we were constantly sort of seeing it through that lens and catching processes that might actually, you know, even inadvertently cause more, you know, inequities to happen. And so I think kind of my summarizing point here is like, land is like very rarely neutral. It's not just a blank slate, especially in neighborhoods like Midtown and places in cities like Cleveland, where we think like, oh, it's just vacant land. But it's, as we've learned through like Leo's Casino and other initiatives, I mean, our land has been it's gone through like all these policies that have, like redlining, that have really tilted it and made it like not race neutral. And so I think that's something that we all have to like kind of think about as we're planning. And that's something that we've really taken to heart as Midtown too. So I will very quickly run through our philosophies. I think that's a good segue. Thinking through, and this is something that's really important to us, is that we really have a philosophy and values that we're kind of like constantly thinking about it, so that we're not inadvertently causing more inequities, right? So, you know, asking ourselves, what are the values? What is our philosophy? And I think as a team, we came up with this, that we want to see the community as experts. They're thought partners and they're assets to the community, not the other way around. And in fact, we really took it to heart to pay all of our residents that are sitting on committees a stipend, because we get paid to do this, and often it's that we expect residents to volunteer their time when they're really like the ones with the lived experience and the expertise. So they should also get compensated for their time. So whenever we go out for grants, we always seek stipends for our community members. We really want to think through, what is the beloved community? What is care and dignity? So believing that everyone has value and that we want to help people feel like they belong, are valued, and are seen, and promoting an ethic of care for others like they're our family. So especially during COVID, we saw this happening where a lot of community members were coming together to say like, okay, even though I can't see you in person, these are ways that I'm going to care for you. So in Asia Town, there was a group of mothers that we discovered through our organizing that they like learned to bake, as we all kind of did during COVID, I think, but they learned to bake these like amazing Asian desserts. And so our organizers got a grant to say, why don't you make care packages for your neighbors? So neighbors could sign up to get these care packages delivered to them. And so there's this, the mothers were like, I feel like I have purpose during this time because I can actually serve my community. Restoration and reparation. I think this is around land use and believing that development complements, not complicates, the lived experience of our community. Working to restore the built environment that was systematically removed from communities of color. And I think this is where we're sort of being challenged ourselves, is to have tough conversations about restorative justice and reparations. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to like reclaim land? Like in the case of Leo's, who does it and how does it get done? Storytelling and new ways of knowing. I think a lot of what we found with our communities is that there's oral histories and stories that, like in Asia Town, a lot of people like really engage through qualitative data collection and less surveys. Like surveys were like really hard for them to like wrap their mind around. So I think providing space for individuals to hear and communicate their stories in the form they prefer. So we'd ask questions like, tell us about someone who taught you something. This is the Asia Town work. Tell us someone who taught you a value that you find really important, and why is it important? Think about your neighborhood so that your great grandchildren are living in it. What do you see in this neighborhood? If you could wave a magic wand right now, what are 3 things that would make your life easier? And so like having that kind of dialogue and resident to resident interviews in some cases like really bore a lot of fruit. And then of course, connection to history and heritage. So upholding, protecting, and honoring the culture makers. That could look like cooks that have recipes. It look like elders and family members. And then in our neighborhood, valuing the history and long lineage of Indigenous, Black, and Asian people who have stewarded, built, or shaped the land that we operate on. So that's just a little bit more about what underlies all that we do. And I'll leave it at that, so.
Joyce, that was really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So for our attendants, like if you want to drop a question in the chat, or you could unmute yourself, feel free. To give you some time to think, Joyce, can you explain like what draws you to community development over other areas of planning? Because as we know, like planning is very multifaceted and we can be in a lot of settings. What do you enjoy being in this community development nonprofit sector?
Let's see. So I think if we're thinking about the other sectors, there's like the public sector, like city government, there's private, right, where you're like basically consultants. I mean, I'm pretty open to all of the above, but I think personality-wise and mission-wise, I feel like nonprofit community development work really spoke to me, just in terms of the mission-driven aspect. And certainly civic and public sectors, as well as private sectors, can have that too. I think just personality-wise, like I have a hard time operating with protocols, and so city government is like really challenging for me. And there's definitely like hierarchies in City Hall and like a way that you do things. And it's very administrative. Whereas I think for me, I really like sort of like creative and innovative and sort of flexibility. And that's just speaking to Cleveland. I don't know about other city governments. And then private sector, I don't know. I think it for me, it was a lot about investing in a place for the long term. Whereas I think for private consultancies, you're like, you get to work in lots of different communities and like learn about a lot of different communities, which is really great. But I think for me, it was really like seeing long lasting change over time. And I have to say, like, lots of props to my executive director, because Jeff, he is like the craziest person in that he's like, everything is urgent, because he feels like the neighborhood deserves more. Like there was a long period when like nothing was happening because it was not stewarded that well under old executive directors. So he's a little nuts, but in a good way. And I think for him, you know, he really finds a lot of, he really leans towards a more like open and innovation-based practice. So we get to throw our crazy ideas at him to see if they stick. And he's willing to say like, all right, yeah, if you want to do that project, I'll give you some funds to do it. So for example, Warner and Swayze, which is this like gigantic old abandoned factory that has been abandoned for 30 years. There's like tons of graffiti in there and it's going to get redeveloped. And so we were like, but that graffiti is really important. It's like a really important place for underground street art. And it's often a narrative that's not told very much. You know, there is sort of a culture around it that is seen as a nuisance. And so we wanted to kind of tell that story. And so he was like, yeah, sure. Like if you can do it in this budget, let's do it. So we're documenting all the graffiti. all the graffiti styles in Warner Stacy to sort of preserve that history. Not every boss is like that. So I like to say that like when I first got to Midtown, it was still very that like business chamber kind of style. So it was like a little bit like, you know, suit and tie-ish. But I think because our executive director was there and he was new, I felt like he was going to do something new. So even if it wasn't like the sexiest CDC that I would have wanted to like join right away, it's like their leadership, the leadership that was there was believable and honest. And I feel like sometimes that's just the direction you need to go. It's like, okay, maybe it's not like the organization I wanted to be in, but I believe in this leader, and I'm gonna like trust that I can be a change maker and that my voice is heard here. And I feel like those things are really important when you're looking for a job. So.
And how long have you been at Midtown now?
I am coming up on year 5 this August, so 4 years.
Yeah, and now I would say that like reputation wise, Midtown is viewed as the kind of like leading CDC in Cleveland in terms of out of the box thinking and as it relates to like community engagement. So that's awesome. You laid the groundwork because now I think a lot of us, you know, view that as the attractive place like that we would want to take our talents to.
Cool. Come to Cleveland. We'll take you all.
What projects are you most proud of?
What projects am I most proud of? So I have 2 examples. I think going back to East 66th Street, so that's the one where 2 artists were part of the team. So I feel like I didn't actually do very much for that. I was like I kind of coordinated a lot of the meetings and got the right people in the room. But that project has borne so much fruit just because we got like these amazing people in the same room to work on something together. And so as a result of that, not only do we have this streetscape plan, but we have a youth council that formed, that's called the Huff Youth Council. And it's these like talented 18 to 24-year-olds who are from the community, and they're working on the city of Cleveland zoning policy in Huff right now. And they're making art because of it. And they're organizing themselves to understand more about real estate development and like kind of interfacing with community development at a level that I think most 18-year-olds don't get to, especially if you're from like sort of like overlooked neighborhoods, I would say, quote unquote. And so that has been just great because I feel like there has been so much put into motion now that like residents are being like self-sufficient and empowered. And I feel really proud about our Asiatown work. And the again, I feel like I'm not like doing that much. We basically set up a structure to be able to hire a director and an organizer, and getting the right people in the room again. They have just done so much organizing in a way that I feel like residents really feel like they belong and they are heard for the first time. And that feels great. So I'm really proud about that. Yeah.
So I feel like your answers lead well to our next question. You know, I feel like as planners, we tend to sell ourselves short and maybe feel a little bit maybe inadequate or just worry about our skill sets relative to other disciplines. And what I've always found is like you are like the queen of like all these great intangible skills, like coalition building and just organizing meetings and stuff like that. What skills do you think are most important for planners, and especially younger planners?
Yeah. So I was speaking with my partner recently who is going through B school, and actually one of the things that he was reading about like how people hire and the sort of human resources is that like emotional intelligence is often valued greater than technical skills. And and let me back that up because I think technical skills are very important. Like we should all be competent at our jobs. But I think it's the idea that like, if you are a leader and can show leadership, so you can show initiative, you can speak up, you can manage a project, you can deliver a project, you can navigate the halls of City Hall to get something done. Like those are all things that people look for. And that takes practice and time. So like as a student, like it's a great opportunity to begin honing a lot of that sort of leadership skill and initiative. I think it does depend on like where you want to go. So if you do want to do GIS, like you definitely need to have a technical skill. But I think if you want to sort of be like paving the path in community development, I think a lot of that will require like leadership, having hard conversations, managing conflict, knowing how to manage a team. So I would say that like that's stuff I always tell CSU or master's program about. So
do you have any other advice maybe specifically for those who are graduating in the spring? I know there's kind of a lot of uncertainty about the job market, but maybe a little bit less so than this time last year.
It's so tough. Like the pandemic is just so tough. Like I just really feel for everyone who's graduating this year. It's like super competitive, but I feel like networking is like the crappiest word ever, but making connections maybe is a different way to put it. Like that is how people get hired. I think in Ohio, especially in Cleveland, it's like smaller cities, right? And so it's really based off of relationships. And that's actually why I went to grad school, because I, wanted to switch careers and I was trying to apply to all these like urban planning jobs. And I was like, I actually need something to like back me up. So like, not just the degree. So like, I wanted to go to CSU because they do local projects, like as a part of their curriculum. So through that, got connected like more on the ground to communities, to stakeholders like the Cleveland Foundation. And so I think like through that connection making ended up like people kind of like have a sense of who you are and can like trust who you are. And that's really important. So if you haven't been, start trying to connect with people like crazy, like learn about what they do and get a 30-minute virtual coffee with them. Give them a sense of like who you are, like what you value, and maybe some ideas that you have. But I think the not in-person thing is like so challenging. That's all I got.
No, we appreciate that.
Yeah.
One last question I had was some things that we've been talking about is like accreditation. Can you explain why you kind of pursued the eco districts accreditation?
Yeah.
And explain, maybe give an overview of what that is.
Sure. So let me address accreditation in general. So as a community development practitioner, I actually do not need to get accredited. While I think if you go into other, if you go to practice at a firm, you might need to get accreditation. So eco districts is like a more new accreditation. It was free or not expensive to go through, I think. You just have to spend some time like studying up on it, but it's essentially learning a new framework for how to integrate like sustainability, equity, and one other thing, clearly I don't remember. In planning, so think of it, this is not the right analogy really, but like think of it like LEED certification, but for a district. And thinking through like what are some of the frameworks. And at the end of the day, they want you to like practice the framework in planning, which means that you have to pay $10,000 to eco districts to like do the administrative part and implement, which we have not done just because it hasn't really fit into our planning framework that much. But I think it's a good way to learn different frameworks that are out there. And I think it gives legitimacy too. Like if you have an accreditation, people are like, oh, okay, like this person at least comes with some tools. So I honestly haven't done much with eco districts, but it's helpful to have under your belt.
Now, Joyce, have you ever thought about getting your AICP in the future, or do you view it not necessary? Or
good question. I've thought about it. I haven't done too much research into it. I think if I go into consulting or go off on my own in some capacity, I would probably try to get it. But at this point, it's not necessary in my field. So the community development work.
Yeah, that's great, because that's kind of a reoccurring kind of question that we're getting among our students. And so that's just really, I think you're a good example of that it's a nice to have, but maybe not need to have based on wherever you're working.
Yeah, I feel like once you start working and people know who you are and like trust your work, stuff like that. I mean, like no one's going to look at your GPA. No one's going to look at, this, specifics about like what your GRE score was or whatever. Like people just know the quality of your work by who you are. And so in some cases, some of that accreditation is not necessary. But I think if you want to boost kind of name recognition, like, yeah, it's definitely helpful.
Well, that was the last question that the CRIPSA board had kind of brainstormed. Any other last questions for Joyce before we let her go? And just want to thank you again for taking some time and sharing some insights with us. We really appreciate it.
I have a question. Are there any opportunities for undergraduates over the summer to work with MidTown Cleveland?
Good question. So we typically hire one intern per semester. I have to check with my boss to see where we're at with that. We currently have an intern now, but he's graduating. So yeah, I mean, feel free to get in touch. I can leave my email. So feel free to follow up with me. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer on me right now, but we're always looking for interns. So yeah.
Joyce, can you explain maybe the AmeriCorps Vista, like what the next step is for Midtown?
That's great. So are you all familiar with AmeriCorps Vista and like generally what it is? It's like a 1-year volunteer program that's a federal program, and you get a stipend that is like almost livable. Not very livable, but we just finished our first 3-year round of Hire Local. And, that was our big like economic development, workforce development initiative. We're actually hiring right now for a new AmeriCorps Vista, and our new cycle is really around this focus on health and wellness, which again, not new to the community, but new to us as an organization. And this person will be coordinating mostly with the Dave's Teaching Kitchen around, healthy food, healthy recipes, in conjunction with university hospitals and their Rainbow Women's Center. But I think a lot of it is going to be like, how do we promote healthy food? How do we do vacant land reuse in a way that's productive, that reduces social determinants of health, negative metrics. And so that's available for some of you who are looking to graduate and apply for something. So we have that coming up, and that's going to be for another 3 years. So one Vista per year, I should say.
Yeah, and so that's how I got my foot in the door at Midtown, and I got a lot of great experience beyond just some. As Joyce said, like my position was very much workforce development oriented, and that's something that I had never done before. And so I learned a lot, and then I got to do a whole bunch of different things related to the Carnegie Plan, use all the bike racks. And so Midtown really allows you to pursue your interests in addition to the tasks that you are assigned to as a Vista. So really great opportunity. Encourage everyone to look into that, whether at Midtown or other planning adjacent organizations. I think it's a really good opportunity that might not be as obvious as like a planner one job.
Yeah, I hope I did an okay job selling it. I think it really is helpful because now Nick knows a lot of people. Like he knew a Midtown firm that he got connected with, and hopefully has a job opportunity with. So I think there's like, you know, even if it's not like your most ideal, like my first job in Midtown was not my ideal. I was doing like business outreach, which is great. I still learned like a ton and got to do some urban planning projects on the side, but that like kind of led me to the next level. So yeah.
Well, Joyce, oh wait, Mitch, you raised your hand?
Yeah, I did. So actually, I just had a quick question. You know, okay, so like obviously, like in communities, like one of the big, I think oftentimes challenges, is sometimes, I was about to ask, so I guess like one of the ways I feel like that communities can really, really also make an impact too is through civic and political engagement. So with that being said, at Midtown, like what are some of the strategies that y'all do to really kind of just like try and like focus on civic engagement and really just empowerment to really kind of just give people the tools and knowledge that they need to really advocate to make a difference in the community?
Yeah, our general philosophy is that when we have connected with residents, it's very relationship based, and we try to stay away from transactional stuff like, hey, we need something from you. So a lot of us have like numbers on our cell phone for like residents that we talk with, and trying to make that the norm, I think, is important to us, and less like professional and distanced. I would also say that I think we did an audit on our organization to see what we sort of had to quote, like where we fit in the landscape, let's just say that. So we have a lot of people on our team who are really knowledgeable in real estate development. And so actually one of the things that we talked about was like real estate development can be like a, so to speak, black box, where it's like, it's really only like key developers that really are like the number of people who are employed at a development company and all the return on investment that they get is like the ratio is very high compared to other industries like manufacturing or health even. And so I think we wanted to really break apart and like demystify and democratize what real estate development is. So since we have these real estate developers, we created a Real Estate 101 class that we're launching this year for any member of the community. It's a very like basic literacy around like, this is what we're talking about when we talk about land as an asset. And because not everyone thinks of land as an asset, and maybe fundamentally we shouldn't think about it that way, but in terms of like development, that's how it's thought about. So, so it was really cool. The Huff Youth Council has been doing this zoning project, and there was this dilapidated 16-unit apartment building that is like actually really gorgeous. It's brick. And they're like, well, we would love for it to be a group home. And, ideally that's kind of the use that we want to see. And so that was kind of backed up with our team when we said, well, okay, so that's the lens that you're coming at it with. I want to give you the lens that a real estate developer will come at it with, just so you know, like what people are thinking. These are the questions they're asking. How much does it cost to buy? How much does it cost to renovate? How much rent can I get? And so I think that really gave a framework that like helped you think about things in a whole different light. And so that's just an example, I guess, of ways that we've been trying to do that. Yeah, we've been putting a lot of emphasis on development practices and even thinking through like, okay, well, if a developer really wants to develop with us, what are some things that they can do in lieu of like a community benefits agreement? Like, is it mentoring people in real estate development who are, you know, neighborhood developers? Is it, I don't know, just like different things that we've been trying to like, just kind of pilot, so.
No, that's a great answer. Yeah, something else I want to say about Joyce, like the way she interacts with community members. I think like for me, always set like kind of like a gold standard of like when Joyce walks into a meeting or like a community meeting, you know, and seeing multiple members like happy to see her and like treat her as like part of a family. You know, I think that's the kind of what we should all kind of aspire to do.
That's really nice. I appreciate that. Everyone can do it. Yes.
Yeah, that's a big thing of just like, because for the grad students, you know, we have the comp exam coming up and we talk about planning theory, you know, but like working in community development, I feel is like it's such like boots on the ground, like learning, like you're actually putting it into practice. And we always talk about like the different types of just like theories, you know, and I just think Midtown's a great place to like actually do it. Yeah, I think that'll be our last question. We want to be respectful of Joyce's time. Joyce, thank you so much for hanging out with us and sharing your knowledge.
It was great to see everyone. So thanks for hanging in there and good questions. All right. Good luck.
Thank you.
My email's in the chat if anyone wants to reach out. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.